A lot of my music has dealt with time in different ways, but I think dealing with a kind of more redundant model of time is something which is slightly new for me.
The sound itself is rather tenuous, so even though I'm sticking to like where it happens, it speaks differently every time.
Yeah, that's completely intentional.
That's the point. No, I know.
Yeah. So you attempt to play it the same way, but there's going to be those really nuanced variations, which is great.
Yeah, I'm trying to be exactly the same, but because of just being a person, a human, each time is going to be a little different, no matter how hard I try to make it exactly the same.
In this particular piece, I think the challenge is within something that is monolithic and a sort of very, very broad wash of time, how do you be precise, be a kind of organism as an ensemble? So adjusting balance in very specific ways, listening very hard. Josh is conducting all of these patterns while playing these tuplets over top of it. It's very difficult.
I feel like it's putting my mind on two tracks so that the scroll action can happen independent of what I have to do musically. I found it challenging at first to be able to make that split happen, but as we all practiced it together, it felt natural after a while.
Can I see your cue into the loops?
Yeah. We're like... I'll give you eye contact.
That's the loop.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have a loop before the loop before the loop.
There's almost two different ways, I think, of looking at time in this piece. There's the sort of performative time that comes from the interactions between players and Josh conducting time and everybody kind of communicating and following events through time. And then there's a sort of digitized version of time at play as well, which I think comes about through the mechanical loops that Sam is producing.
The electronics are very subtle, but they're there to just kind of mess with the listener. So throughout most of the piece, when the ensemble is playing, their notated sounds are these kind of backwards envelope, kind of sound like reversed recorded sounds. And then there's a little trick that's played on the audience where sections of the piece are recorded and played back in loops.
Becoming able to balance, to like have this kind of resting posture within that very active mental space, I think is one of the interesting challenges about Bryn's piece, and then getting to record it. I think we got to refine that even further as we just repeated these sections more and more. Now I feel like we can really play it. So looking forward to playing it again.
The fact that they're all composers, all improvisers, and ninjas, they can read anything, but engage with my intentions more than the fact I could have made a mistake on the score because it's not clear. So this level of geekery towards the music without ego is incredible. One thing I'm really sensitive to is form. And I think that film has for years thought and reflected on the role of the editor. So not just the storyline, but how having the timeline being juxtaposed, superposed, stretched just slightly too much, or the rhythm of the editing convey meaning towards the same narrative than the piece. hopefully creating a timeline that makes sense in and of itself, seeing that the material is actually going somewhere. And that's quite important, the notion of plot in narratives, even in abstract narrative like my piece.
Pierre's piece is very fixed and it's very exact. You know, he's an electronic musician, so he's giving us very, very specific feedback about, you know, this dynamic should be a little bit less than that. He wants something very precise. And we love precision too, so that's we're into that.
It can be very, very loud, don't worry. How do you write for Pluta? At one point I had an idea. I said, I can be very dynamic in feeding you the material you need and sending you where you need to be sent, and therefore routing, like the routing became a virtuoso routing from my part to allow him to be virtuoso player. He didn't have to think about the logistics.
He also has made this fantastic electronic part that is playing back. So I'm not playing all the electronics of that piece, and he'll send me signals during the course of the piece that I can process and do different things with. And he had different ideas of how to play, but having the live electronics adds a kind of constantly moving, improvised element to this otherwise stable, composed texture.
You can just go right through. I'll know where you are.
Over recording.
For example, 100 and just 4 after that.
Nothing more than that, is it possible?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm trying to do.
Okay.
It's like incredibly finicky. Like, I'm just trying to keep it under control. If I don't, and like, this is how I'm doing it. So if it plays, I'm like, please God, catch something, but it's like, that's the only way to do it. And sometimes they will play a sound that is in the resonance, and it goes boom, and other times they don't, and it doesn't. So it's just like super,
Yeah, get that.
yeah.
Oh, speaking of scenes.
Well, it'll be a surprise.
Yeah.
Within the context of the group, 4 of us are making pieces. We're writing all for each other. The individuals and their personalities and our histories together are informing what we write. And the way that we as performers are writing for ourselves, I think also is a unique feature of working in that particular practice, in that particular way. Each of these modules is somewhere in that space of like a really fixed, really open, really fluid. It's meant to just sort of like gradually show you that space is wider and wider and wider. And so the bringing in text and semantic meaning in the middle of the piece is a kind of strategy to burst it open even further.
I acted. And having acted, decided thinking was unnecessary. In the absence of decision, I acted to clarify my thinking.
When you've gotten really accustomed to just making sense of things in terms of sound, in terms of things being really diffuse and kind of open, or really specific and sort of in the moment and articulated, all of a sudden to have to just process meaning in that way, and then the addition of these kind of hand signals that she's doing, which are matched with specific percussion and violin sounds. I think for me, I'm interested in whether or not that might retroactively change your hearing of previous material and think, oh, is this all just kind of coded, meaningful, like hieroglyphics of sound or something? More and more, we're all trying to start from our areas of strength and expand and continue to grow. And through each other's influence, I think we're gradually kind of rounding out our own practices as musicians. So this piece is reflective of that kind of ongoing expansion of different ways in which we can interact.
My piece is called Lines on Black. it's a multi-movement piece that's modular. So there are these sections of music that I can kind of link together and overlap in different ways. And it's also modular in that sometimes there's improvisations between some of the composed sections. So it's a piece that mixes composition with improvisation and mixes instruments with live electronics and sampled electronics.
He's brought a lot of his improvised practice to this group. And I know that personally, I've learned a ton about improvisation through playing Sam's work and just improvising with him and doing projects together.
That sounds awesome.
Mincek will get involved.
There's all these kinds of different relationships between the instruments, and I'm trying to create as many of those interactions as I can.
The group is the way it is because of the people in it. It's not a traditional genre, and so I think it's, again, it's the breadth and the variety of artistic practices is something that we really value, and try to include everything that everyone is bringing to the table, make a space where it all makes sense together.